Smooth. Call them today to schedule an appointment at 402-480-6671 or go online at deckcityne.com.
This is the Happy Hour.
You guys going to happy hour?
Coming at you live from the heart of Lincoln, America.
Yeah, I'll come for a couple.
Here are your hosts, Nick Sainert.
I want to know what it's like to commit a crime without having to spend time in jail.
And Enrique Alvarez Clary.
C is for chunk.
Brought to you by Empire Fence and Netting on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Welcome in. Happy Thursday as we are chugging along to Nebraska, Oklahoma. Starts Saturday, obviously, 11 a.m. It's going to be a big Oklahoma day today on the Happy Hour. We will kind of hear some things from Brent Venables here in the first segment. And then a little before 1:30, Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network, as well as 94.7 The Ref. He does work for Sirius XM Radio. He does work for Fox Sports Radio. He does stuff for ESPN Plus. He will join us.
He does a lot of stuff.
And full disclosure, we just got done recording the interview about 15 minutes ago. Not even 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Because
shout out to Chris Plank.
He was supposed to join us live at 1:30. And then Rico, he shoots me a text yesterday and says, Nick, got a change of plans. Sirius XM threw a Chris Kleiman interview on me today at 1:30.
Well, can't say no to that.
I said, well, you can't say no to Chris Kleiman, but I said, ask him about the Nebraska job. I did not say that.
Why not?
I did not, because he's already been asked about it.
And ask him again.
No. Ask
him every time.
That is the stuff that makes these next 2.5 months going to be extremely
it's going to be annoying.
Excruciating.
It's going to be annoying and it's going to be dumb, but keep doing it.
Because
ask everyone.
What else is he going to say? There's no reason to. So Chris Plank.
What's he going to do? Say no again?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, this time he's going to say
what?
yes.
Actually, I've been considering.
Actually, since you said something about it, Trev Alberts did reach out to me. But once again, so Chris Plank, Sooners Radio Network, and all the other stuff, before he makes his way to Lincoln this weekend, he'll join us at 1:30. You'll hear that. Since it is recorded, I'll be able to tell you guys there's a lot of interesting little nuggets in there. I kind of threw in a question, and I won't give it all away because obviously Chris does it much better, or explained it much better than I did. But I asked him how much former players are involved with the new staff.
And his answer
was
don't tell the answer.
Something along the lines of, after Bob Stoops, it was non-existent. Practices were like Fort Knox. However, under the new staff and Brent Venables, there are former players everywhere. And so that was something that kind of stood out to me, because there's a lot of parallels, I think, right? I think there's a lot of parallels between two tradition-rich programs in Nebraska and Oklahoma.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And they believe in the same things. He told me off the air that the expectations this season are higher than they were last season.
Really?
And they thought that they were a national championship contender last season.
How do you get higher than
How do you get higher?
National champion.
Because that's the
not
thing.
A contender.
Not
just
a contender.
Champion.
They were going to play for the college football playoff in the championship. It's truly remarkable how in the first season under Brent Venables, they feel confident enough that he's going to take them to the promised land.
Those are some high expectations for a first year.
And here's the thing. You want to know what he called Brent Venables? A prodigal son. And when he said that, I stood back and I go, oh boy.
Careful with those words.
Careful. However, through the first two games, Oklahoma, here, I'll read some statistics if I still have it open, hopefully. Some statistics. Oklahoma's defense is now, granted, they've played UTEP and Kent State.
Yep.
Right? But there's something
I said down the Miners and the Golden Flashes, though.
I said this early in the week, Rico. I'm jealous of the teams that win the games they're supposed to win in the fashion that they're supposed to win them. I'm jealous because it seems so simple, but it's been so difficult.
Yeah, I said it earlier. I said it's kind of weird talking about how confident I am in a team that just lost to Georgia Southern, but Oklahoma's only played UTEP and Kent State. And I'm like, yeah, but Nebraska probably would have lost to one of those.
Exactly. So here's the statistic that I was reading through the Oklahoma program today and found out. Through 2 games, Oklahoma's defense has allowed an average of 8 points per game. They average 11.5 tackles for loss per game, 4.5 sacks per game, and they are allowing less than 3.5 yards per play. And what's crazy, so you bring in this defensive-minded head coach in Brent Venables, right? And his time at Clemson.
College football.
Yeah, exactly. You bring in his time at Clemson. And their defensive coordinator now his name is Ted Roof. He was a defensive analyst at Clemson under Brent Venables. And now Oklahoma, through 2 games, and what they want to do this season is have such a balanced team that at times you're relying on your defense to win you games rather than your offense outscoring your opponents.
But not always.
Because they have the ability to score 50 plus if they need to.
Yeah, you have a balanced enough team where you'll have games where the defense is winning you games, or games where the offense is winning you games, and games where both what is the word I'm looking for? Both sides of the ball. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but both sides are playing so well that you just kind of run away with the game. So that's what Oklahoma's looking for. However, they are, despite the numbers and how good they seem, they are 109th, I believe, is what Bach told me, in pass yards given up on the defensive side of things.
Yeah. So a name texter just said this. You just rattled off what Oklahoma's defense's average is. What Oklahoma defensive average is per game. I'd be surprised if our defense reaches any of those numbers for the entire season combined. Now, once again, we prefaced it with they've played UTEP and Kent State. And they were up 7-3. They were almost held scoreless in the first half against Kent State. They were down 3-0 at one point. Then they rattled off 33 straight. UTEP, it was a little bit more of a deciding game. They won 45-13 in week 1. But it's one of those things where you can kind of tell, and I asked Chris Plank this, if Brent Venables was an SEC move, and he was saying yes, it shapes up really well for the SEC, because you have a guy in Jeff Lebby as the offensive coordinator, who used to be at Ole Miss as the offensive coordinator last season under Lane Kiffin,
who was at UCF before.
Yes, understands what kind of offense is needed to be successful in the SEC. And then you add in the defensive mind of Brent Venables and the new defensive coordinator, Ted Roof, who both were at Clemson through that reign.
Played in the SEC, however, played a lot of SEC teams, so they know exactly. I mean, they played Alabama how many times in the national championship?
Exactly.
They know what
they get it. They get it. So I find it fascinating. So once again, we'll be joined by Chris here in about 15 minutes or so. It's a pretty in-depth and sometimes bigger picture interview on a couple of the questions. We do dive into the game a little bit deeper, so that'll be coming up here in the next couple minutes. I do want to get to some of the things that Brent Venables said in his press conference, though, because there were a lot of parallels from what we heard with Mickey Joseph and what we heard from Brent Venables this week. And there's one, Rico, I'm guessing you found it.
I got all three.
There's one that is, I can't remember the name, on
Jaden Davis.
Thank you. On Jaden Davis. So I cut this clip a little bit in half because we didn't need to hear about how Jaden Davis has been playing for the Sooners. But they talked about him buying into this program, into the Oklahoma program. And I want to bring this up from Mickey Joseph really quickly. What we heard earlier this week is we know Mickey Joseph is a huge relationships guy. And in the back of your guys' mind, when you hear this, keep in mind a couple things. First, Mickey Joseph and his potential to be the next head coach in Nebraska and his opportunity that's out in front of him. And if you saw the Husker Hype video yesterday on Twitter, you would have seen Mickey Joseph greeting all the guys at the door saying, let's get it. Let's do this. Here we go. Get ready. And showing that he has relationships with a lot of those guys. And then I want you guys to kind of listen to what Brent Venables is saying and notice if there's any parallels between what you hear from Venables and what you heard from Mickey Joseph on how guys can make strides in both their play on the field, but also in their journey off the field. Here's Brent Venables.
And he's been very intentional, but there's a whole team of us that have tried to work with them and create a level of confidence through work and through teaching and learning, a new system and how we can help them. And I think it's important as coaches that you're always trying to play to a player's strength, and don't ask them to do with things that they're not great at doing, but they have to get better. You always want to attack the weakness, improve the weakness. Hopefully you can get it to become a strength. But it doesn't just happen, as we know, overnight. And so there's a lot that goes into that, both mentally and physically and fundamentally. So that's what I've seen. And Jaden's been a byproduct of that, of just, one of the most powerful things that you can say to somebody is, I believe in you. But your actions got to back that up as well. That doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable and you don't correct them when they make mistakes, but you got to, through a genuine, authentic relationship, you got to develop that trust.
That clip, towards the end of that clip, that reminds me of the first time we heard from Mickey Joseph when he was talking about the wide receivers that he's coached, wide receivers that he's going to coach, and how when they discover a strength or when they find a strength with that wide receiver, they're not going to try and change it. They're not going to try and make somebody who's a deep ball threat into a first down machine. They're not going to take somebody who has sure hands and try to turn them into something else. They're going to work on that strength to make it better, but then what they're going to do the most of is try to improve the other skills around that person, but not overcoach them to turn them into something they're not. And that's what Brent Venables was just saying there. You try to coach these guys. You don't want to overcoach them. You make them better in what they're lacking, and you help them build upon that strength.
One thing that Brent Venables also said is one of the most powerful things you can tell somebody is that you believe in them. Mickey Joseph earlier this week on how he will give his team hope said, quote, confidence and let them know I believe in them. Parallels. Head coach it. Like there is a method here, and through 2 games, Brent Venables' method has worked. We're yet to see if it's going to work for Mickey Joseph, but at least the foundation is there. We know that the knowledge and the understanding that it has to come from relationships. And we mentioned it when we were doing our breaking news coverage on Sunday. Jay Foreman mentioned it a ton, how being a head coach is less about the X's and O's, and it's more about dealing with the relationships, the egos, all those little facets of the program.
Less about the X's and O's, more about the Jimmies and Joes.
Yes.
You got to build the relationships. You got to talk to people. You got to know who you're coaching. They're not just a number. They're not just a jersey and a helmet. They're people behind that. So you have to know what's going on. And DP said it multiple times. You have to know, if that person broke up with their significant other, if that person is having family issues, if that person's car broke down, on the way to practice, if their pet died or something like that. You have to know the people behind the face mask, because as soon as you do that, you'll be able to reach them at a deeper level, and they'll be more than willing to climb up a tree if you ask them to run through a wall, to hit that guy, harder than anybody else is. Like they're more than willing to do the things you ask them when you know them on a more personal level, as opposed to, hey, number 12, go do this.
Well, and we know Mickey Joseph has that foundation, right? Because he speaks on it quite a bit, and the players, the athletes, the guys that are in the room speak on it quite a bit about how Mickey Joseph is their guy, right? You hear it from recruits all the time. There's something to be said. There's something to be said for all these recruits that Nebraska has in their recruiting class for 2023. There is something to be said for all of them reaffirming their commitments, despite the head coach not being there.
If anybody has been on Twitter lately, you've noticed that
they're all reaffirmed.
They've got that picture that's been made for them and probably sent to them asking, when the coach talked to them, like, hey, how are we feeling? You sticking with us? And so far, at least from what I've seen, every single last one of the Nebraska commits has said, I'm in. I'm still here 100%. This is home.
And what does that tells me more about Mickey Joseph and the staff that's there right now, more than what it tells me about Scott Frost. And we want to put that on the back burner, obviously. But I think that there's something to be said. Once again, I'll reiterate it. There's something to be said that nowadays in the era of college football and how fluid and fluctuating it always is, recruiting is a fluctuating game to begin with. And not just to say that just because they're reaffirming right now on September 15th does not mean that when it comes to signing day in December that it's going to be the same situation, right? Because Nebraska does have 9 games left, and a lot of it does matter if you win or not. However, right now for this specific instance and this specific time in the calendar year and in the schedule and part of the season, it means something to see every guy reaffirm their commitment, although the head coach got fired. And that's why I think there should be a good buzz and a good energy surrounding this program on Saturday, because it shows that sometimes, once again, we talk about it in terms of players all the time. When somebody loses a guy to a transfer portal, we talk about it ad nauseum, addition by subtraction. That can be the same for a coach. And I'm not coming out on the air and saying that, oh, Nebraska, the bad bug in the entire room was Scott Frost, because I don't think it's that case. I think it's much bigger than Scott Frost. And Trev Alberts has also said that this program is much bigger than one person. Mickey Joseph said that as well. But I think that you can argue that it means quite a bit nowadays when you see guys reaffirm their commitment, because it kind of gets lost in the shuffle that guys commit to a university rather than a coach.
People were worried about the buyout being set there and setting up Scott Frost, and how is somebody going to commit to a university if they know the head coach isn't going to be there, et cetera, et cetera. And this just shows you that, and if you want to go with the you commit to a school, not a coach type deal, sure, whatever, you can go with that as well. But to me, this is more along the lines of the relationships that were built, not only from the former head coach Scott Frost with these recruits, but from the position coaches, from everybody within that football team, building relationships with these recruits. And despite the loss of the head coach, the recruit still feels as if Nebraska is home, whether that be, the university and the campus just felt like home. The fans made it feel like a great place to go, or it's the assistant coaches and the now head coach, the interim head coach, and Mickey Joseph that made it feel like home. It's something to be said for the relationships built not only through the head man of a program, but through everybody else within that program. And that shows that they've hopefully got a good thing going despite losing your head coach.
They've put in the work. They've built the foundation. 402-464-5685, the Honda Lincoln hotline, the Starter Heyman text line. Both those will be open for you guys the rest of the way here. Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network will join us here momentarily. Tyler says this: most players commit to position coaches, not the head coach necessarily. And I understand that. However, when a head coach gets relieved of their duties or dismissed, or they move on to another job, a lot of times you see decommits or guys just kind of backing off their commitment, keeping Nebraska as an option, but backing off their commitment, because it usually creates a ripple down effect, a trickle down effect, to where if the head coach isn't there, position coaches aren't going to be there. So that tells me that there's a chance that Mickey Joseph is able to be the head coach. There is a clear opportunity laid out in front of Mickey Joseph, which I think we can all be excited and kind of rally around.
I think the recruits feel that as well if they're reaffirming their commitments to Mickey Joseph and this staff. I mean, you like you just said, there's a ripple down effect where if the head coach leaves, sometimes that means more than often that means that the assistant coaches, the position coaches, are no longer going to be there, because when you bring in a new head coach, they want to bring in their own guys. So the fact that the recruits are reaffirming their commitments means that they believe there is a large chance that Mickey Joseph will be retained as the head coach. And that's just something that you can look at. I mean, that's just the recruits. That's just how they feel. I mean, you're not really sure. It still has to go through the rest of the season, but if the recruits feel that way, you never know.
I think it's a perfect example. Matthew and Hickman points out a lot like Oklahoma and USC. I think that's a really good example, because if you look at Lincoln Riley, he dips out, he goes to USC. And this is basically my point. Goes to USC, takes a couple of his assistants with him. A couple of them stayed back as well. But that showed that guys are committing to coaches rather than universities. And there is power in Trev Alberts and Mickey Joseph being able to reach out to recruits, specifically Trev Alberts. There's power in that. And Trev Alberts understands. He admitted on Sunday that he enjoys reaching out to and talking to them from their perspective about Nebraska and about the possibility of playing in Memorial Stadiums on Saturdays. So I think there is something that is valuable, and there's encouragement to see guys reaffirming their commitment. One other quote that I want to get to from Brent Venables before we get to break and get to Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network is Coach Venables was asked do you have an explanation on why Nebraska struggled? And I thought this answer was very interesting, especially later on in the response. Here's Coach Venables.
I don't. It doesn't take much to be on the wrong side of it. That's all I would say. Obviously, since they went to the Big Ten, I've followed them a lot less. And my memories really go to the competitions that we've had there. I think we lost 10-3 last time we were there. I think we had 5 turnovers on offense. And 2009 is when that was, and we played them in 2010 in the Big 12 championship. So my memories go back from the Kansas State and Oklahoma days, and then the last X number of years. I just haven't, really been as in tune. I do know they've played really competitive. Watching their season from a year ago, just snake bit for whatever reason, whether it's injuries or just timing standpoint, just being on the wrong side of it. And there's no one thing or person I would expect to point a finger to. But they've done a good job of, again, foundationally, they haven't been far away, in most of their games. They've been right there.
So
Is it
Brent
weird?
Venables.
Is it weird if I say that Brent Venables should do like audiobooks?
Sounds like Matthew McConaughey.
He's got a good voice.
He's got a Matthew McConaughey.
The rasp is perfect.
The rasp and the time and the pitch.
The little accent in there.
Yeah, he's slow. He's methodical with
He
his
should do
answers.
audiobooks. I would fall asleep,
Audiobooks, yeah.
probably, but
So then probably shouldn't do audiobooks.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe like bedtime books.
Maybe that's the issue. There's also one in there, Rico, before we get to break, about environment. There's a lot of discussion talking about the environment for for Oklahoma. Dylan Gabriel is going to be playing in his biggest environment yet on the road. Brent Venables, first time as a head coach
on the road
and in a hostile environment, and
staying an hour away
in Omaha. And then also Brent Venables in his press conference said that 40% of their guys have yet to suit up in a true road game. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of a twist as well. Here's Brent Venables on kind of the environment that they're going to face.
Yeah, I think people will be on edge, and I think there'll be a lot of emotion in the stadium. And I know this, when I've had my back against the wall in this profession, I feel like I've always responded, and the pressure has brought out the best in me. And so that to me is what you'll see, from a Nebraska team. I think they've had 13 one-score games, in the last year. And they've done a nice job recruiting good players. They've got good schemes, and they've first couple of games this year, they've had some tough moments right at the end of the game. It happens. So this is a team that's incredibly capable, talented, tough. Again, good schemes, put them in good position. They got quality players on both sides of the ball that can play with anybody. So we expect their best. Expect a great atmosphere. One that, where they've circled the wagons and galvanized and, play inspired, all of those things. That's what we expect.
There you go. That's what they expect. Nebraska's best. All right, let's go ahead and take a timeout. When we come back, Chris Plank of the Sooners Radio Network, as well as 94.7 The Ref down in Norman and Oklahoma City, as well as Sirius XM Radio, Big 12 Radio, ESPN Plus, all that stuff. He'll be joining us to talk Sooners, Nebraska. Coming up next, you're listening to the Happy Hour on The Ticket.
Follow Nick and Enrique on Twitter at Nick_Sainert and at Radio Rico AC. More of Happy Hour is next on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
The dog days of summer are here. Is your yard in need of a touch-up as we head into the fall season? August, September, and October are the months for aeration, and Penner Sprinkler and Lawn is the place to call to get the job done right. If you're noticing any issues with your sprinkler system through the hot summer months, they're always a call away, and they're already scheduling installs for sprinkler systems for next year and all other lawn care needs. Call Penner Sprinkler and Lawn today at 402-413-1215.
Need service on your home air conditioner? Call the company Lincoln has counted on since 1952, Bryant Air Conditioning and Heating. No matter what brand you have, when you need service, you want Bryant's experienced pros working for you. Friendly NATE certified technicians with the tools, training, and technology to restore your comfort quickly. No matter what brand, when you need service, just call Bryant. 467-1111. Bryant Air Conditioning, Heating, Electrical, and Plumbing. We do whatever it takes.
Breaking news coverage on 93.7 The Ticket.
Scott Frost is no longer the head coach for Nebraska football, and then Mickey Joseph is the interim head coach.
The black shirt, Drill Farley.
And I actually was sitting down with Mickey around 9 o'clock this morning, and I tell you what, we had no idea.
Husker Hall of Famer Jay Foreman.
You know, we got 9 games to get this right, and I know he's not coaching just to try to get experience and get through the season.
We bring in the Hall of Famer, Eric Strickland.
Today is a new day, and we're starting fresh.
93.7 The Ticket.
Tune in to the Teammates Mentoring Hour each Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. on 93.7 The Ticket. Hear stories from the program started by Tom and Nancy Osborne and how it's changed mentors and mentees' lives and how you can be involved. The Teammates Mentoring Hour, Wednesday nights from 6 to 7 o'clock on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
College football in Lincoln, America. The time has come. Start your game day off right with the A1 Automotive Ticket Tailgate pregame show. Join the Ticket crew live from Tipsy Tina's in the Haymarket as they bring you all the coverage you need to get you ready for the action. It's the A1 Automotive Ticket Tailgate pregame show on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Brought to you by A1 Automotive, Mullen Motors, Wall to Wall Wine and Spirits, Bauer Underground, Ben Bleicher with Professional Realty Group, and Ritchie Brothers.
If you want to make new floor shopping easier, come to O Street Carpet. Hi, I'm Steve Carper. Our flooring professionals can help you choose the best flooring for you, your family, and your budget. We eliminate the confusion. Even better, you'll be enjoying your new flooring much sooner. No 6 or 8 week waits. We'll install right away and save you money on installation. Floor shopping made easy every day at O Street Carpet.
O Street Carpet.
1732 O Street. Family owned and operated. Always the best value.
Your high school football coverage rolls on right here on 93.7 The Ticket. Hey guys, it's Nick Sainert. Join me for 2 football games this week. First, on Thursday, sophomore quarterback Jeter Worthley and the Lincoln East Spartans take on the Rockets of Lincoln Northeast at 7 p.m., leading up to a 7 p.m. kickoff on Friday night for a matchup between Lincoln Southeast and Lincoln North Star. Both those games are coming your way this Thursday and Friday right here on 93.7 The Ticket, your home for high school football.
Mike Shaver here for Trek CBD. Summer is here, and that means you're having garage parties with neighbors, hitting the golf course and the pool. The drink of this summer isn't your typical seltzer. It's drinkable Delta 8. Yep, Trek CBD has drinkable Delta 8 seltzers with mango and lime flavors for 4-packs, 12-packs, coming in a variety of mango, watermelon, lime, and berry. They also have hemp-derived Delta 9 syrups to put in your beverages, and as always, the excellent Delta 8 gummies. Trek CBD at 84th and Andermatt and TrekCBD.com. Trek CBD, CBD done right.
93.7 The Ticket, Fox, KFXL weather. Sponsored by John Henry's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning.
Partly cloudy skies, still rather warm for mid-September. We'll see a high of 88. South winds rather strong, gusting over 25. We'll see a chance of thunderstorms moving into the region this evening into tonight with a low of 65, and a continued chance of thunderstorms tomorrow with a high of around 85. I'm meteorologist Tim Wright for 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
A good game with good friends. But isn't it time to up the score when it comes to the food? Wings and Rings is here for every football fan. Catch the game on one of their big screens or snag a tailgate pack to go. They're cranking up the heat and throwing in mad flavor this season. Stop by your locally owned Wings and Rings on O Street Meridian Park or 48th and Old Cheney in Williamsburg Village, or grab some crave-worthy Wings and Rings to go. Make them your go-to destination to watch your team bring home the win. Wings and Rings. Game time just got better.
You want to feel important. You want to be a part of something bigger, something that matters and can help change things. You want to feel like you belong. We know. We felt that way too, and that's why we did something about it. We aren't just Army National Guard soldiers. We are normal people just like you. But our part-time service in the Army National Guard means we get to be more. When our communities are in need, we get the chance to stand up and do something about it. We get to serve in our own region and help the people we call neighbors. Whether they are in the mountains of New Mexico, the plains of Nebraska and Kansas, the ranches of Oklahoma and Texas, the farmlands of Missouri and Arkansas, or the bayous of Louisiana, we are here for our hometowns. And together, we can make a difference. Take on your legacy. Visit NationalGuard.com to find out more.
Sponsored by the Nebraska Army National Guard. Aired by the Nebraska Broadcasters Association at this station.
You're listening to the Happy Hour with Nick Sainert and Enrique Alvarez Clary. Sponsored by Empire Fence and Netting on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Welcome back into the Happy Hour, 93.7 The Ticket, theticketfm.com. Nick Sainert and Enrique Alvarez Clary with you guys, getting you ready for Nebraska, Oklahoma. Sooners coming to Lincoln Saturday, 11 a.m. kickoff. And we decided to go down to Norman, and we're joined on the Honda Lincoln Hotline by Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network, as well as 94.7 Ref down in Norman. Chris, hey, appreciate the time, man. How's everything going down in Norman?
Good. There's a lot of excitement. I think fans are pumped to get back up to Norman for the first time, or back up to Lincoln for the first time since 2009. Hoping for less than 5 interceptions this time around, but there's a lot of excitement anytime two traditional rivals like this get together, and obviously much different energy for OU heading into Saturday than what they had last year.
I want to get to the whole coaching, news or I guess changes for for Oklahoma, because Nebraska's going through some for themselves. But first, when I say Nebraska, Oklahoma, we've been asking our listeners all week. I mean, when you hear Nebraska, Oklahoma, what is your first memory?
Well, for me, as somebody who moved to Oklahoma in the early 90s, right? My first year, whenever I had moved to Oklahoma, was 93. It wasn't always good news for Oklahoma, man. It was it was challenging through a majority of those 90s. You kind of get your heads kicked in by Nebraska. But as I moved to Norman in 2015 after I've lived in Oklahoma my entire adult life, and you learn, right? You learn about Barry versus Tom. You learn about the game of the century. You learn about Johnny Rodgers. You learn about Billy Sims. And this past summer, someone had donated a bunch of old play-by-play tapes to us. And we went back and listened to a lot of the great games. It was just, you hear the names and you hear the legends and the legacy. So, I wasn't necessarily someone that grew up in a college football household. So, that Friday after Thanksgiving, that tradition wasn't something that was a big deal in my house. But man, as soon as I moved to Oklahoma, it was boom in your face. And it was really cool to see Oklahoma get its program back to where it needed to be in the early 2000s. And, still to this day, Nick, people talk about that game in Norman in 2000 as one of the greatest home games in the history of Oklahoma Sooner football between OU and Nebraska. So it's special. It really, truly is, even if you're not a diehard historian lifer for Oklahoma Sooner or Nebraska Cornhusker football.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating because you always hear, the Eric Crouch pass in 2000 or obviously the Johnny Rodgers in 1971 in the game of the century, but that's from a Nebraska fan perspective. So I'm always fascinated to hear from maybe an Oklahoma Sooners perspective on what their first memory is. I guess for Oklahoma fans and for your listeners down for the Ref and throughout Sooners Radio Network, what is their vibe? Like, what's their opinion right now? You guys are 2-0. Nebraska's obviously 1-2 and going through a coaching change, and Mickey Joseph is the interim. What is your guys' vibe or opinion going into this game on Saturday?
Well, I think it's twofold, right? I think number one, if Oklahoma's who most of us feel they are, if they're a top 10, top 5 team this year, then they should go on the road and beat a Nebraska team that just gave up a bazillion yards to Georgia Southern. But I also think that everyone hits pause and realizes, man, this is still Nebraska. And it's still a program to, in my opinion, to fear. It's kind of just a little side road. It's kind of weird. I work on Sirius XM, and my producer on Big 12 Radio is a Michigan State alum. And it was always because he's younger. He's in his early 20s. And I don't know, you're younger, Nick, but he said, it's weird because Nebraska to me was always the team that I felt like we were going to beat at Michigan State. And it's just, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. That's just not Nebraska football. But taking it back to current day, it's still Nebraska. It's the ranked opponent heading into Lincoln. It's a big game. Mickey Joseph is got everyone fired up, and understandably so. And it's outside of, hey, you're a ranked team, you go in, you take care of business if we are who you think you are. There's also this other thing, that second part of it, and it's an unknown. I would say it's fear. It's unknown. Nobody knows. We did a 3-hour show today. I just got off the air. And Art's question was, what do you expect from Nebraska? Like, what do we know, right? What do we truly know? It's a team that came into the season as a double-digit favorite over Northwestern, and if not for an ill-timed onside kick, they might win that game, and they might win it going away. We saw Casey Thompson put up 1,000 yards on Oklahoma last year throwing the ball at Texas. We know their defense has struggled this season at Nebraska, but what do you truly know? And I think that unknown is kind of concerning, right? And I know there were 10 in-season, and by in-season, I don't include the bowl games, but there were 10 in-season coaching changes last year, and the new coach was able to win 4 of those, including TCU beating Baylor, right, whenever Baylor was a ranked team. So I just think there's a lot of unknown. I think that's where Oklahoma fans are right now, and just curious to see how OU responds in its first true road test and to see what Nebraska is going to be all about.
It's funny that you mentioned unknowns because that's kind of where we're at. I mean, you and I talked yesterday. That's kind of where we're at. The curiosity has really arisen, I should say, in these last 72 hours since Mickey Joseph took over. We're joined by Chris Plank of the Sooners Radio Network, as well as 94.7 The Ref. Like you mentioned a minute ago, does some work for SiriusXM and Fox Sports Radio. You mentioned the environment, Chris, and Dylan Gabriel's a guy who came from UCF, was initially committed to UCLA, but then switched his commitment during the offseason to Oklahoma. First of all, kind of a two-parter. How big of a get was that for you guys after you lost Caleb Williams to USC? And then second, I mean, is there any concern about a couple of the guys going into this environment in Lincoln?
Sure, because it'll be the biggest crowd and the most hostile crowd that Dylan Gabriel has ever played in front. And, Brent Venables has talked about it quite a bit. I think it's like 40% have never suited up uniform before the first game of the season. And now you're going into your first road game, 11 a.m. kick, in front of some of the greatest fans, if not the greatest fans in college football. Coach Venables joked about it. He's like, "We tell you to love you. They're gonna pat you on the back, and then they're gonna be more anti-you than you can imagine whenever that game kicks off." And I think you're staying an hour out of town. We're staying in Omaha, so that 11 a.m. kick that pushes things back a little bit earlier for this team. So yeah, I think there's some concern. But before the Dylan question, I hope you guys have been able to kind of catch just how big this is to Brent Venables. I mean, I'm telling you right now. I mean, the way he talks about Nebraska, and I know Scott Frost was the home run hire, right? Whenever he was chosen, this was a no-doubter at the time. But man, I would have thought Brent Venables would take Nebraska in a heartbeat. This rivalry, this matchup means something to him, and I think that that resonates with his players. So sure, there's a fear, the coach, of how some guys will respond in that environment. But the coach has been really dialed in on making sure his guys know how important this is. And then the other part, it's interesting because Dylan Gabriel committed to Oklahoma before Caleb Williams had made his final decision. And that's what, it's kind of interesting how looking back, Caleb Williams' dad wants to get in the headlines saying, well, they kind of pushed him away. No. Everyone always wanted Caleb to stay, but they were giving very mixed signals. And it's wild because Dylan Gabriel was at a point where he was literally at an airport getting ready to get on a plane and enroll at UCLA, and he would have been a Bruin this year. I mean, minutes away from doing that. So it's been really big for them to get him. My gosh, they have brought in some quarterbacks now because they have him. They brought General Booty from the JUCO ranks. Bevel transferred in from Pitt, who knows Mark Whipple well from being his backup quarterback last year and starting in the bowl game for him. So they've improved the depth in that room, and Dylan Gabriel has been a leader from day one. And I don't know where they would be. I don't know where they would be right now if Dylan Gabriel hadn't transferred in. It's been a big get for him.
We're joined by Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network here, and we mentioned Brent Venables, and I kind of want to dive a little deeper here. I'll ask you a broad question, and I kind of want you just to run with it. What kind of coach is Brent Venables?
Passionate, energetic, focused, and the term that they use a lot is holistic. So I'll try to keep it as concise as I can, and I apologize. I'm getting into one bad sell area here on my drive, but when Brent Venables took over, it was a little different. Number one, he's like a prodigal son, right? He was part of Bob Stoops' first coaching staff in 1999. He was a part of a team that won the first national championship in, gosh, what was it, 20-odd years at Oklahoma. So Brent Venables was always a guy that Sooner fans adored. And then he goes to Clemson, and we know the rest is history there. Became one of the greatest defensive coordinators in the game. So when he came back, it was, okay, we're getting back to what Sooner football is all about. But he also did something that most people don't do when they come to a program that's, had won 6 consecutive conference championships before last year, had won 10 games, 5 of the last 6 years, and had played in 4 of the last 6 playoffs. Nick, he came in and changed everything. I mean, he stripped it, as he likes to say, to the studs. They redid the meeting rooms. They're going to build a brand new state-of-the-art football facility, right? That's just football only. They absolutely changed the way in which they kind of laid out their schedule. I mean, he came in, dude, with this mindset of we're doing everything different. And that's hard for people, right? Because you come in and there's administrators that say, whoa, wait a minute here. We've been consistently winning games here, right? We've won championships. Why are you changing everything? But it's more than just, obviously, a holistic approach, man. It's the mind, it's the soul, it's the body, right? They started this thing called the Soul Mission, where they have 3-4 former players who are there for these guys to help them in the community and help them through things that maybe coaches can't. They've really, the outreach, community outreach has been big. The student side of it, the life lessons, the dare I even say, the faith side of it has grown. So all of the things off the field, it's been incredible to see how he's changed. And, he's brought this holistic approach. And so far through 2 games, it's worked. Now let's see, and its biggest challenge of the season so far, how this team handles, right, the new leadership. But, long answer to a short question, what kind of coach has he been? Man, he has been driven, and it has been really, really fun to see. It's different.
We're joined by Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network, and you kind of mentioned former players, and I want to be careful about how I ask this because it's kind of a delicate subject right now with Nebraska, as I'm sure you can understand, because Nebraska and Oklahoma, 2 tradition-rich programs, and how active are former players? I know obviously you guys got a lot of former players on the staff, including DeMarco Murray, who's the running backs coach. But, I mean, how active are former players just involved in the program?
Yeah, so I'm going to be delicate with how I answer this, too. It felt like after Bob Stoops retired and Lincoln Riley took over and had a year to kind of put his mark on the program, it just seemed as if that open door that was there during the Stoops era kind of closed a little bit, right? Practices became like Fort Knox. And, former players would have to, they were very rarely, if ever, invited to events. Nick, I don't know how else to say it. And it's not a knock. It's just Lincoln had his way of doing things. And, there wasn't a lot about, I don't want to say the history, but there just wasn't a lot about the guys that were there. Now, to Lincoln's credit, he had a lot of former Sooners on his staff, and obviously that's carried over to Brent Venables, right? Even whenever he left for USC, he took a former Sooner, and Brian Odom with him as his linebackers coach. But, as soon as Brent Venables was hired, it became a player. It's a player-led program, and that's what Bob Stoops said whenever he was hired. He's like, Oklahoma's always been about the guys. It's always been about our players. And, it was not a shot at Lincoln, but people that had suddenly predicted this doom about Sooner football, it was, hey, Oklahoma football was here before Lincoln Riley, and it'll be here afterwards. And so, yeah, it's a good question, but it was not the most welcoming to former players, even with a handful on staff. Now, I mean, dude, they're everywhere, and it's real. Not just on the full-time. You mentioned DeMarco Murray. He's his running backs coach. Jeff Lebby, their offensive coordinator, is a former Sooner player. Joe John Finley, their tight ends coach and assistant offensive coordinator, essentially former Sooner. Bill Bedenbaugh's been on the staff for like 11 years. It's like he's a Sooner. Buell of the Sport, John Cooper, former Sooner. Rufus Alexander. I mean, all these Soul Mission guys, 3 to 4 former Sooners. So it meant a lot to him, Nick, to get that back and to make it a player-led program. And that's what he was. That's what he's done, and that's what you've seen. So yeah, they've been very involved.
A couple more before we let you go. I know you got a busy day ahead, and you're making your way to Lincoln here in the next couple of days. Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network hanging out with us here on a Thursday. When we talk about Oklahoma in recent years, I guess defense isn't one of the first things that comes to your mind. It's the offense. It's the high-powered offense. You got Kyler Murray, you have CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Hurts after Alabama, Caleb Williams, all these guys and this high-powered offense. But I want to read off a couple statistics that I'm sure you know, but I want to make sure our listeners are aware of before Saturday's game. Now, through 2 games, Oklahoma's defense has allowed an average of 8 points per game, 11.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks per game, and they're only allowing 3.9 yards per play. I mean, is this just how much of a step forward has the Sooners defense taken in the short amount of time that Brent Venables and I believe Ted Roof has been there?
Yep.
So I'm going to cut the interview off right here. We're going to go to a quick break, and when we come right back, we'll have the rest of the interview with Chris Plank right here on 93.7 The Ticket. You're listening to the Happy Hour.
Download our app by searching 93.7 The Ticket in your app store to stay in touch and listen all day long wherever you are. More of the Happy Hour is next on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
James Enterprise Incorporated, that company that hauls your gravel, rocks, and material for your farm or construction site, says thank you to the people of the healthcare community for putting yourself in the way of danger to save the public. That is what it means to be a hero and to build a beautiful legacy. This message brought to you by James Enterprise Incorporated. For all your hauling of rock, gravel, and materials, call them at 402-432-6740. That's 402-432-6740.
Keep your tailgate cool with the dazzling hot deal from Sartor Heyman Jewelers. Get a free Yeti cooler with your purchase of only $1,500 or more. Take advantage of interest-free financing with no money down. Sartor Heyman has gorgeous jewelry in every price range, so buy her the diamonds she's been dreaming of and get instantly rewarded with a Yeti cooler for free. Offer ends soon, so hurry in and snatch up this cool jewelry deal. Sartor Heyman Jewelers, a Nebraska tradition since 1905.
We're still as busy as we've ever been. Across the country, you may see a small slowdown, but in Lincoln, Nebraska, we're not slowing down.
Bob Benish is the founder and president of Aspen Builders, online at aspenbuildersinc.com.
Our Southwest Lincoln development is just going great as we keep growing in Southwest Lincoln. Down the road, we'll have a new school, so that's exciting. We also have a new development out in East Lincoln over by Hillcrest Country Club. Just a real neat subdivision because it features trees, great views. If you're concerned about interest rates, many lenders in town offer extended lock periods. So it's worth contacting a lender and asking them about an extended lock. That's a big deal.
Make your dream home a reality and call Aspen Builders at 423-6811. Online at aspenbuildersinc.com. Your home is waiting at Aspen Builders.
Eustace Body Shop, where our customers send their friends. That's the greatest compliment we can receive. If you've been in an accident, we'll get you back in your vehicle as quickly as possible. Our technicians care about you and your family and repair your vehicle to factory standards. We handle your claim from start to finish and provide a free loaner car. Stop by for a free estimate. Eustace Body Shop, just south of 88th and Highway 2.
The most recommended Eustace Body Shop. That's who we are.
Mary Ellen's Food for the Soul. It's soul food right here in Lincoln. Ribs, wings, catfish, coleslaw, cornbread, grits. I mean, I'd say it's food like your grandma used to make, but my grandma never made food like that. If you haven't already, you've got to give it a try. Check out their location across from South Point at 27th and Pine Lake, or find their food truck at events all over town, or visit them online at maryellens.com to see the full menu. Mary Ellen's Food for the Soul. Let them fix you a plate.
Start your Sundays off right with Jeff and Nicole Essink on Fitness Fanatics. Jeff and Nicole discuss health and wellness, how to achieve fitness goals, and more through the life of gym owners and gym goers. It's Fitness Fanatics from 9 to 11 a.m. on Sundays on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Tractor Supply is looking for full-time team members for their Waverly Distribution Center. Applicants can expect a 3- and 4-day work week schedule with additional overtime days, with both day and night shift schedules available. Stand-up forklift and high-reach forklift experience is a plus for open positions, but they're willing to train for those without experience. At Tractor Supply, they work hard, have fun, and make money. Apply today at tractorsupply.jobs.
There's not many things worse than having plumbing issues at your home or business, but it's even worse if the problem isn't fixed correctly. Select Plumbing gets it right the first time, and they specialize in several things: general plumbing, water heaters, faucet and fixture repair, underground sewer and water repairs, backflow testing, and more. Keep your property free from leaks and other issues. Call today for a free estimate at 402-560-6197. Plus, they're hiring service plumbers. Contact Select Plumbing to inquire at 402-560-6197.
Casey's General Stores is giving away 2 tickets to each Nebraska football home game this season. To enter, just head to any Casey's General Store location in Lincoln during the football season, scan the QR code at the front counter, and fill out the online form. One winner will be chosen at random 2 days before that week's game. So head over to Casey's, stock up on all your tailgating snacks and drinks, and register to win 2 tickets to a Nebraska football game, brought to you by Casey's General Store and 93.7 The Ticket.
If you want to make new floor shopping easier, come to O Street Carpet. Hi, I'm Steve Carper. Our flooring professionals can help you choose the best flooring for you, your family, and your budget. We eliminate the confusion. Even better, you'll be enjoying your new flooring much sooner. No 6 or 8 week waits. We'll install right away and save you money on installation. Floor shopping made easy every day at O Street Carpet.
O Street Carpet.
1732 O Street. Family owned and operated. Always the best value.
93.7 The Ticket. Fox KFXL weather. Sponsored by John Henry's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning.
Partly cloudy skies, still rather warm for mid-September. We'll see a high of 88. South winds rather strong, gusting over 25. We'll see a chance of thunderstorms moving into the region this evening into tonight with a low of 65, and a continued chance of thunderstorms tomorrow with a high of around 85. I'm meteorologist Tim Wright for 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
You're listening to the Happy Hour with Nick Sainert and Enrique Alvarez Clary, sponsored by Empire Fence and Netting on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
We'll get back to the rest of the Chris Plank interview right here on the Happy Hour right about now.
Couple more before we let you go. I know you got a busy day ahead, and you're making your way to Lincoln here in the next couple of days. Chris Plank of Sooners Radio Network hanging out with us here on a Thursday. When we talk about Oklahoma in recent years, I guess defense isn't one of the first things that comes to your mind. It's the offense. It's the high-powered offense. You got Kyler Murray, you have CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Hurts after Alabama, Caleb Williams, all these guys, and this high-powered offense. But I want to read off a couple statistics that I'm sure you know, but I want to make sure our listeners are aware of before Saturday's game. Now, through 2 games, Oklahoma's defense has allowed an average of 8 points per game, 11.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks per game, and they're only allowing 3.9 yards per play. I mean, is this just how much of a step forward has this Sooners defense taken in the short amount of time that Brent Venables and I believe Ted Roof has been there?
Yep. People are so mad about it, Nick. It's too much. They're giving up too much. And it shows you how quickly you can do that 180, right? Last year, they couldn't get off the field. You know, Tulane's driving to win the game in the opener. Nebraska, if they hadn't missed an extra, they were driving to tie the game at the end of it. And the Sooners have won their first 2 games, comfortably and in impressive fashion. But there's all the defensive line isn't getting there enough. And they're letting the quarterback run too much. I mean, it's wild to see how quickly you have like this 180, and this defense has been really good here. But to be fair and honest, this is its biggest test, right? I mean, Kent State runs a hurry-up offense, but they don't have the skill players that Nebraska does. UTEP had an offseason to prepare and did some unique things, but they don't have the kind of players that Nebraska does. So this will be its stiffest test, in my opinion. The cornerbacks have played well, but they haven't really been tested. The goal has been to limit explosive plays, and I think they've done a good job of that. I think they've only had like 2 or maybe 3 plays over 20 yards in the first few games. What I think will be interesting on Saturday is to see, have they held back? Are we going to see a little bit more? Those numbers are great, and they allowed some things against Kent State and UTEP, but does Ted Roof get that green light to be a little bit more exotic? Do we see him get after the quarterback? I don't think they've blitzed very much of it all so far this season. Does Reggie Grimes and Ethan Downs, they're big edge rushers, do they get after the quarterback? Is there more disruption in the middle of the defense? So it's really been fun to see that defense become the first bus in, if you will, and kind of the best part of this team. But they're shaping up for their biggest test of the season so far. And I guarantee, I'm not the only one that's saying it, but Brent Venables is saying it. No one's tearing down the goalpost based on what's happened after 2 games, but it is definitely promising.
All right, Chris, last one before we let you go. I want to ask a bigger picture question since I got you on the line. I'm sure we'll have conversations in the near future and before Oklahoma moves to the SEC. But, I mean, how big of a discussion point is that? And was the Brent Venables hire maybe more for an SEC kind of landscape, or was it for what Oklahoma needed right now?
Yeah, great question. I think it's for the SEC. And, if you go back, Nick, one of the big knocks whenever, and I don't want to say knocks, but one of the big questions whenever Lincoln Riley decided to go to USC was whether or not, Lincoln felt like the commitment would be there from the administration to give OU what it wants to be successful in the SEC. Others have said, well, Lincoln didn't want to coach in the SEC. To me, none of that matters, because when Brent Venables came in and whenever he took the job, the first thing he said in his press conference was, I know we're going to the SEC and I'm the guy to take us there. And I think from that moment, you were like, okay, let's go. The donations have been larger than they've ever been to the program. I mentioned they're in the process of soliciting bids to build a state-of-the-art football facility. I know Nebraska is doing the same thing, from talking to my pal Jessica Cootie about it. So, kind of an arms race between these two teams and what they want to do facilities-wise, which is always fun. But no. Brent Venables was a hire to get this defense SEC ready. And Jeff Lebby knows what it takes to have an offense in the SEC. So, yeah, he came in right away, and he's like, listen, we're ready. Behind the scenes, there's a couple of guys that have been integral in getting the program where it needs to be from a facilities and just an administrative perspective. That Turnipseed came in from Clemson, and he had been at Alabama with Nick Saban. He knows what it takes. So, yeah, they feel like they found their guy to get him to the SEC. And Brent Venables has not just kind of understood it; he's accepted it, and he's embraced it, and he's run with it. So it's been really cool to see that.
We thank Chris Plank for his time and his interview right here on the Happy Hour on 93.7 The Ticket. Unfortunately, we're going to cut the interview a little bit short. Maybe we play the rest of it tomorrow. Who knows? I thank you all for listening so much. Up next, On the Block with Nate and Strick. That is going to be it for us here on the Happy Hour. You guys have yourselves a wonderful day.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com.